space, a brand new chart. For the head and for the heart, it's your journey, your tools.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive, the place where we cut through the noise, synthesize the research, and get you genuinely well-informed quickly. Today, we are taking on a deep dive into what might be the most personal and pervasive system in your body, the human alarm system.
We're diving deep into the neurobiology of anxiety, of reactivity, and distress. And our foundational premise for this entire conversation is, well, it's pretty simple. Anxiety is not a failure of character. It's not a lack of mental fortitude. It is a profoundly biological response.
And we want to help you flip that script, right? From what is wrong with me that I feel this way?
Exactly. To something more like, what is my body trying to protect me from, and how is it going about it?
That reframing is ease. It's absolutely key. And to support it, we've pulled together a really robust stack of source material. We are synthesizing pure neurobiology, how brain structures like the amygdala work with the, I think, revolutionary insights of polyvagal theory.
And we're pairing that with the clinical architectures of cognitive science. So specifically, the top-down tools of CBT and the behavioral strategies from acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
Which creates a full-spectrum toolkit.
It does. But to start, we really have to recognize this profound disconnect that causes so much of our modern anxiety. It's a concept called the evolutionary mismatch.
I love this concept. Let's unpack it. So essentially, our core physiological hardware, the body's wiring for stress, was designed back in the Paleolithic era.
Exactly. It was engineered to handle immediate, physical, acute threats.
Yeah.
A large predator, a sudden injury, or, intertribal conflict.
And these threats were resolved quickly.
Very quickly. You either fought, you fled, or you collapsed, and then the threat was over. And the biological system had time to recover.
But now we are using that same ancient hardware to manage abstract, chronic, modern threats.
Yeah, you can't run from an overwhelming mortgage payment.
You can't fight a difficult conversation with your boss. And the fear of social rejection on, say, a networking platform can feel biologically like a mortal threat.
That's the irony. The system that was designed to save us from a lion is completely overwhelmed by the constant drip, drip, drip of 21st century stressors.
So it's the friction created by our Paleolithic hardware meeting the digital world.
And that friction generates chronic stress that the system just never gets a chance to metabolize. That's the engine of so much generalized anxiety.
So to address it, we need to know exactly how that engine is wired. Okay, let's unpack this. We have to start with the command center, the body's autopilot, the autonomic nervous system, the ANS.
Right, and this is running all the essential processes you don't have to consciously monitor. Your heart, your breathing, your digestion.
It's all on autopilot.
Historically, we saw the ANS as a simple binary switch, the classic teeter-totter.
Right, so you had the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS, that's the accelerator.
The mobilization system. Its function is to immediately prepare you for action, the famous fight or flight.
So when the SNS flips on, what is actually happening in the body, chemically?
The system releases a surge of catecholamines, primarily adrenaline or epinephrine. That instantly increases your heart rate and your blood pressure, and crucially, it redirects blood flow.
It redirects it from where to where?
It takes blood away from your internal organs, your digestive tract, your reproductive system, and shunts it out to your large skeletal muscles, your arms, your legs.
So you were instantly primed to run or to fight?
Instantly. And the balancing force was traditionally thought to be the parasympathetic nervous system, the PNS.
The brake, or the rest and digest mode.
It supports homeostasis and restoration. It's what slows the heart down after the threat has passed and allows you to, digest a meal.
But that simple binary model, it was a massive limitation, wasn't it?
A huge limitation, because it completely failed to explain why, when we're overwhelmed, the human body might freeze or even collapse.
Right. If the PNS was just about resting, where did that immobilized defense response fit in?
It didn't. And that's where polyvagal theory steps in later. But for now, let's focus on that initial spark of the alarm.
And that spark is located deep in the temporal lobe. It's the brain's amygdala, often called the smoke detector.
It's a perfect metaphor. This little almond-shaped structure is designed to constantly surveil all sensory data, scanning for even the slightest hint of danger.
And what's fascinating here is its operating principle. It's speed over accuracy.
Exactly. It prioritizes getting the information out quickly, even if that information is wrong.
How does it do that?
The amygdala receives raw sensory information milliseconds before the neocortex. The logical thinking part of your brain even knows what's happening. It's an evolutionary safety net.
So if you see a coiled shape that looks like a snake,
The amygdala fires, and you jump back before you've even had time to consciously realize, oh, that was just a garden hose. The reflex beats the thought.
and the cost of that reflex is the false alarm. You end up jumping back from a stick that was just a stick.
The false alarm is the inherent trade-off. Panicking at a stick is evolutionarily much, much cheaper than missing a real snake.
And the problem for people who suffer from chronic anxiety or GAD or trauma
Is that this smoke detector becomes hypersensitive. It starts triggering a full crisis response to minor stress. A late email, a rude comment, getting stuck in traffic.
it treats those things like a mortal immediate danger.
It does. And this is the neurobiological basis of being on constant alert.
So once that smoke detector goes off, it launches this massive hormonal cascade. This converts the electrical brain signal into a long-lasting physiological state. This is the famous HPA axis.
Right. Think of the HPA axis, the hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis, as a hormonal delayed relay system.
A relay system.
The amygdala elutes the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus then tells the pituitary gland to send a message. And that message travels down through the bloodstream until it reaches the adrenal glands, which sit right on top of your kidneys.
And the end result of that whole relay.
The body gets flooded with the powerful stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol.
Adrenaline is the quick, explosive kick, the rapid heart rate, muscle tension, the instant mobilization.
But cortisol is the slower, longer-acting one, and it's responsible for the prolonged, damaging effects of chronic stress.
How so?
Cortisol increases blood sugar to sustain energy, and, most importantly, it suppresses every function that's deemed non-essential for immediate survival.
Which explains so much. That's why chronic anxiety leads to systemic issues like gut problems, weakened immune systems, sleep issues.
Of course, the body keeps diverting resources to survival mode. And here's the key point about chronic stress.
What's that?
In a healthy system, high levels of cortisol signal the hypothalamus to turn the alarm off. It's a feedback loop.
But in chronic anxiety, that feedback loop malfunctions.
It breaks down. The system either becomes desensitized to cortisol or the amygdala just never stops screaming danger. And this persistent state of high cortisol is what clinicians call allostatic load.
The wear and tear on the body?
The wear and tear from chronic toxic stress. It leads directly to burnout.
Beyond just the hormones, the system is also chemically regulated by neurotransmitters. And there's a tug of war happening there as well, isn't there?
A constant tug of war. The main brake pedal for the fear circuit is GABA, gamma-aminobutyric acid.
GABA.
It's the primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. You can think of it as the brain's natural Valium. It just calms the firing of neurons.
So if someone has a deficiency or maybe reduced sensitivity in their GABA receptors,
They are biologically predisposed to chronic hyperarousal. Their system just doesn't have enough brake.
which makes the appeal of certain substances like alcohol or benzodiazepines really understandable.
It does because they essentially mimic GABA. They force the system to slow down when the body struggles to do it naturally.
And the excitatory counterpart, the accelerator.
That would be glutamate. While it's crucial for memory and learning, an excess of glutamate drives that hyperarousal, the jitteriness, and the persistent racing thoughts that characterize intense anxiety.
All of this complex submerged wiring. It brings us to this great analogy, the anxiety iceberg analogy.
It's perfect. Because when we look at an anxious person, we only see a tiny fraction of the crisis.
That visible tip, that's the outward behavior, the panic attacks, the fidgeting, the avoidance, the intense perfectionism.
It's the irritability.
Yeah.
But the massive structure underwater, the submerged drivers, that includes all the physiological realities we just discussed.
The hormonal cocktail, the chronic fatigue, the deep need for more sleep.
And, maybe most significantly, the psychological drivers that are feeding the system. The trauma memories, the unresolved shame, the unmet attachment needs.
The core insight here for you, the listener, is that anxiety is a systemic, whole-body event. It's not just a worrying mind.
And if you only try to treat the worry at the surface without improving sleep hygiene or regulating the nervous system or addressing those hormonal drivers,
They're only chipping away at the very, very tip of the iceberg. So the moment we acknowledge that anxiety is systemic, that old binary model of fight, flight versus rest, digest, it just becomes inadequate.
completely inadequate. It couldn't explain complex human defense. And this is where Dr. Stephen Porges's polyvagal theory enters the picture. It gives us a far richer hierarchical map of the nervous system.
A map.
It's a foundational shift. It maps the ANS not as a simple switch, but as a hierarchical ladder of 3 evolutionary circuits.
And our position on this ladder dictates our physiological state.
Your state, how you react to others, and how you literally perceive safety and danger in the world around you.
Okay, let's start at the bottom of the ladder then, the most primitive state.
That's the dorsal vagal complex. It's the oldest circuit, using slow, unmyelinated fibers. It's often called the reptile-like response.
And it innervates all the organs below the diaphragm, the gut, the intestines.
That's right. And its ultimate function is immobilization and shutdown.
So if the threat is inescapable, the body essentially throws the emergency brake and plays possum.
Precisely. It conserves energy by drastically slowing the heart rate. That's called bradycardia, and reducing metabolism.
And the experience for the individual
is deep collapse, numbness, dissociation, hopelessness. It's a state of profound physiological withdrawal.
Okay, so moving up one rung on the ladder, we reach the classic mobilization response.
That's the sympathetic nervous system, the SNS. This is the middle of the ladder, the territory of fight or flight.
So when we're activated here,
the energy is high, the heart is racing, and we experience anger, urgency, irritability, pure anxiety. The neuroception, that unconscious scanning for danger, is just confirming. The world is unsafe. I must move, or I must fight.
and the top of the ladder, the place we all strive for.
That's the ventral vagal complex. This is the newest, most sophisticated mammalian circuit. It innervates the organs above the diaphragm, the heart, the lungs, and the key muscles of the face and neck.
And its function is what?
Its function is safety, connection, and social engagement. When we're operating from the ventral vagal state, we are capable of eye contact, our voice is modulated and melodic, and we feel connected to others.
In this ventral vagal system, it includes the mechanism we talked about earlier, the vagal brake.
Yes. The ventral vagal complex actively regulates and calms the sympathetic system. It applies the brake to the heart rate to allow for true connection and empathy. When that brake is on, we feel regulated.
Understanding this ladder, it really changes how we view recovery, doesn't it?
It changes everything.
You mentioned that getting from shutdown, from that dorsal vagal state back to safety, the ventral vagal state, might actually involve passing through a phase of anxiety.
This is one of the most powerful polyvagal insights for anyone listening. If you've been deeply depressed or dissociated, the first sign of life returning might be a surge of anxiety, restlessness, or even irritation.
So that anxiety isn't a relapse.
It's mobilization. It means you are moving up the ladder. Your system is finally generating the energy it needs to exit that collapsed state. It's a sign of recovery, not a sign of failure.
So what dictates where we are on that ladder at any given moment? You said it comes down to the brain's unconscious scanning process, neuroception.
Neuroception is your nervous system's way of figuring out, am I safe or am I not? It's visceral. It happens way below the level of conscious thought. It's that gut feeling.
And your system is constantly scanning 3 core environments.
That's where it gathers all its safety data. First, inside, that's interoception. What's happening in my body? Is my breathing shallow? Is my stomach tight?
Okay, second is outside.
Is the environment chaotic? Are there loud, sudden noises? Are the lights too bright?
And third is between the relational cues.
Is the person I'm talking to using a flat, monotone voice? Is their face expressive or is it rigid?
So if I walk into a room and my partner's posture is closed and their voice is suddenly clipped and flat,
Your neuroception might register that as danger, triggering sympathetic anxiety, even if you consciously try to tell yourself, oh, everything is fine.
the nervous system doesn't listen to language.
It listens to tone, posture, and facial expression. And for those who have experienced trauma, that neuroception often becomes faulty. It gets misbiased.
It detects danger in benign situations.
A neutral facial expression might be registered as threat, because historically, neutrality preceded volatility. The system is just miscalibrated, operating on old, outdated data.
And we have a way to actually measure the health of the system, right? Heart rate variability, or HRV.
HRV is a key biomarker for resilience. It measures the tiny fluctuations in the time between successive heartbeats.
So a high HRV means what?
A high HRV means your system is flexible. The vagal brake can be applied quickly and effectively. You can meet stress and then recover rapidly.
Whereas a low HRV
Indicates a rigid system. It's either stuck on in chronic sympathetic anxiety or it's stuck off in sluggishness. It signals vulnerability to stress.
And this is the direct link back to why controlled breathing is so powerful.
It is. Because when we manually control our breathing, especially by lengthening the exhale, we physically stimulate the vagus nerve. We force that brake onto the heart's pacemaker. You are sending a clear biological signal of safety directly up to the brainstem.
You're overriding the alarm.
You're overriding the electrical alarm that the amygdala is trying to sound.
Okay, so we've established the map. Now let's look at the 4 distinct survival programs that operate within that map. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn.
And these are universal biological programs. They're not personality defects.
Let's categorize them. Fight and flight are the 2 sympathetic mobilization responses.
Right. Fight directs energy to the arms and the jaw. In modern life, we see it as aggression, controlling behavior, defensiveness, irritability.
So anger is just mobilized energy.
Trying to set a boundary or remove an obstacle. In relationships, this is often the fuel for what Gottman calls criticism and contempt. Trying to dominate a partner to feel safe.
It's an assertion of power born from fear.
And flight directs energy to the legs that urge to run. In the digital age, we see this as chronic workaholism, compulsive busyness, or abrupt changes in relationships or even location.
And there's a crucial connection here. Generalized anxiety disorder, or GAD, is often described as a chronic, thwarted flight response.
It is. If you are mobilized to run from a threat, let's say your overwhelming responsibility list or a social situation, but you can't physically leave the room or quit your job.
That trapped running energy has nowhere to go.
It just vibrates within the system as chronic anxiety, restlessness, and hypervigilance.
Okay, next we have freeze, which is often misunderstood. How do we distinguish freeze from a true dorsal vagal shutdown?
Freeze is a very dangerous mixed state. It is sympathetic activation, so the gas pedal is floored, and dorsal vagal activation, the brake is slammed on at the same time.
The body is rigid, tense, hyper-alert.
The classic scared stiff or deer in the headlights state. You're ready to bolt or fight, but you're paralyzed.
That sounds metabolically exhausting.
Intensely expensive for the body. You're holding massive tension.
Yeah.
This is in contrast to shutdown or tonic immobility, which is a deeper, more primitive dorsal state.
So in shutdown,
There's a loss of muscle tone, limpness, often a feeling of leaving the body dissociation, profound numbness, because the goal is energy conservation, feigning death.
so freeze is rigid alertness. Shutdown is utter collapse.
You got it. And finally, the relational defense, fawn.
The appeasement strategy.
Right. It's a relational strategy often seen in those who grew up in volatile or chaotic environments. And it's also a mixed state. The driving energy is sympathetic fear.
But it recruits the ventral vagal social engagement system to execute the defense.
So the person looks charming and engaging on the surface, but it's driven by existential fear.
The core strategy is, if I can anticipate and fulfill your needs, if I can make you happy.
You won't hurt me or reject me. This manifests as intense people-pleasing, codependency, and the inability to establish boundaries or say no.
It must be exhausting.
It's an exhausting, high-stress response that inevitably leads to burnout and deep-seated resentment because the individual is sacrificing their own identity for relational safety.
This entire structure just confirms that human regulation is fundamentally social. We are not designed to manage severe stress alone. We rely on co-regulation.
Absolutely. We are born helpless, so our nervous systems are tuned to those closest to us. When you encounter a regulated, calm person who is firmly in their ventral vagal state,
Soft gaze, melodic voice, measured breathing.
their nervous system projects cues of safety that act as a biological anchor for your own system. It literally lowers your cortisol.
And conversely, if my partner is highly stressed, their dysregulation, the quickened speech, the flat face, the tenseness, that immediately becomes contagious.
It's a biological contagion facilitated by mirror neurons. And this relationship between regulation and connection is why we can see attachment styles as autonomic strategies.
The predictable ways our systems try to achieve safety in relationships.
Let's walk through that framework, starting with the baseline.
Secure attachment.
Secure attachment correlates with high vagal tone and a wide window of tolerance. They can handle sympathetic arousal, a conflict, a disagreement, and quickly apply the vagal brake to return to a regulated state.
Because they trust that repair is possible.
They trust in repair. Now, the insecure styles. Anxious preoccupied attachment operates with this sympathetic bias. They are hyperactivating.
Vigilance is their strategy.
Vigilance. Distance from a partner is neurocepted as danger, triggering a massive alarm response. They use fight, flight, or fawn to protest that perceived distance.
And the dismissive avoidance style seems like the exact opposite response to that threat.
It is. They have a dorsal bias, often defaulting to shutdown or flight. For the dismissive avoidant person, Intimacy and emotional intensity are neurocepted as dangerous, a fear of engulfment.
So to cope, they deactivate.
They deactivate their attachment needs. They withdraw, stonewall, or focus exclusively on tasks to avoid the perceived threat of closeness.
This link between threat response and conflict explains so much about relationship dysfunction, particularly the concept of emotional flooding.
Flooding is the physiological breaking point identified in Gottman's research, when your heart rate exceeds approximately 100 beats per minute during a conflict.
The prefrontal cortex is hijacked. It's taken offline. Blood flow is diverted to the limbic system for pure survival.
So at that point, you are biologically incapable of empathy, of logic, of impulse control.
Telling someone to be rational is worse than futile. It's asking a survival system to use a cognitive resource that has been temporarily shut down.
And this is why we can reinterpret Gottman's four horsemen: criticism, contempt, defensiveness, and stonewalling as these defensive physiological states.
Criticisms is a fight response, and stonewalling, which can look like cold indifference or calculated punishment,
Is actually often the most flooded person in the room.
that's the critical distinction. Physiological monitoring often shows their heart rate is dangerously high, and their system has initiated a dorsal shutdown, a collapse response, to contain the overwhelming sensory and emotional input.
It's a biological attempt to survive.
Not necessarily a malicious manipulation, though it absolutely feels that way.
So that reframes conflict resolution entirely. If you can't talk someone out of a defensive state, what is the required intervention? The required intervention is physical and temporal. It's the strategic timeout. The body requires a minimum of 20 minutes to metabolize that surge of stress hormones, adrenaline, and cortisol before the prefrontal cortex can come back online.
20 minutes. Minimum.
Any attempt at productive resolution or repair before that physiological reset is, by definition, biologically impossible. You have to stabilize the system first.
We've seen how the body launches the alarm. Now we shift to the mind, because once the amygdala has triggered the crisis, the mind steps in to write the disaster movie. This is the cortical hijack in action.
Where irrational thoughts feel utterly and completely true. And the engine of this cognitive hijacking is the brain's deep-seated intolerance of uncertainty.
The anxious mind cannot tolerate ambiguity.
It can't. So it rushes to resolve the unknown by generating worst-case what-if scenarios.
Yeah.
The goal is to solve the problem, but to solve the uncertainty.
And the process is validated by the body itself.
Yeah.
The racing heart, the tight chest. This panic validates the mental narrative. This is the destructive feedback loop known as emotional reasoning.
That's where the thought, "I feel anxious about this presentation," immediately becomes the conclusion, therefore, the presentation will be a catastrophic failure. The feeling, the proof.
And our therapeutic entry point here is the thought triangle, or the cognitive model.
Which maps the relationship. Event leads to thought, which triggers emotion, which then dictates behavior.
Let's use a simple example. Event. My colleague gave a critical review of my work.
Automatic thought, I am incompetent and I'm going to lose my job.
Emotion, shame, and fear.
And the behavior is avoidance. Procrastinating on the next project or retreating from the team, we intervene by targeting that automatic thought.
But first, we have to recognize the systematic errors the anxious mind makes, the taxonomy of faulty thinking, the cognitive distortions.
We bias reality toward the negative. Let's start with the forward-looking ones, the prediction distortions. The most common is catastrophizing.
This involves two specific errors, right?
2. You overestimate the probability of a disaster, and you underestimate your ability to cope with it. So if your friend doesn't text back, the narrative jumps immediately to them being in a ditch, not that their phone battery died.
And related to that is fortune-telling.
That's where you prematurely close the negative narrative with certainty. I know I'll bomb the negotiation, so I won't even try to push for a better number.
It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Because the brain sees failure as a foregone conclusion. Next, the evaluation distortions, which dictate how we process data in the present moment. This includes all or nothing thinking, the binary trap.
Black and white, success or catastrophic failure.
It drives the engine of perfectionism, because if you don't achieve 100%, you treat the outcome as a complete failure. Then there's the mental filter. It's like a tiny drop of negative ink discoloring an entire barrel of positive data.
You focus exclusively on one mistake in an otherwise flawless project.
While ignoring everything else. And the subtle, deeply ingrained distortion, discounting the positive.
Where you actively reject positive evidence.
You neutralize compliments or achievements. The client praised me, but they were just being polite, or I only got the award because my competitor was sick. It's a mechanism that ensures the underlying belief in your own incompetence remains untouched.
And finally, the regulatory distortions, which often manifest as rigid internal rules. We already covered emotional reasoning. The feeling is the fact.
And the widespread use of should statements. These are inflexible rules applied to oneself. I should never feel stressed about public speaking, or apply to others.
My colleagues should always recognize the effort I put in.
And these statements create a massive toxic gap between expectation and reality, feeling guilt directed inward and anger directed outward.
So phase 1 is metacognitive awareness, catching the thought. How do we train ourselves to shift from being in the thought to merely observing it?
We teach the scientist stance. You learn to treat the anxiety as an interesting phenomenon to study rather than a command to obey. And the most critical skill here is differentiating fact versus opinion.
Okay, so if the thought is, my boss is going to fire me,
We ask, is that a verifiable fact or is it a hypothesis? Is it an interpretation?
Yeah.
The moment you externalize it, you create the cognitive wedge you need to stop that immediate panic slide.
which brings us to phase 2, cognitive restructuring. The check it, change it. This is where we bring logic back online to rigorously test the hypothesis.
We use the putting thoughts on trial metaphor.
And this involves creating a balanced verdict, not just a positive one.
Exactly. You state the exact worst-case prediction, the indictment. You then list factual, concrete evidence that supports the thought, the defense.
Then you list factual, concrete evidence that contradicts the thought, the prosecution.
The goal is not forced positivity, it's radical accuracy. That leads to the balanced thought, the verdict.
And for the chronic what-if person, the go-to tool is the decatastrophizing script. Let's detail those 5 steps.
Step 1, identify the worry. Name it specifically. Step 2, probability check. Based on facts, how likely is this worry to come true? Not how scary is it, but how likely.
Step 3, worst-case scenario. Force the vague terror into a concrete event.
What exactly would happen? Step 4, coping strategy. This is the agency step. If the worst happened, what 3 actionable steps would I take? This shifts the mindset from victimhood to resilience.
And step 5, time projection. Will this matter in a year or 5 years?
Which restores proportionality and allows the prefrontal cortex to regain control. Now, traditional CBT aims to change the thought's content, but acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT,
The third wave approach.
focuses on cognitive diffusion, changing the relationship you have to sticky repetitive thoughts, because arguing with a thought often just keeps it alive.
So the ACT question shifts from, is this thought true, to something else.
To, is this thought helpful or workable?
Helpful or workable? I like that.
Precisely. If you are fused with the thought, I am a failure, that thought controls your action. Diffusion is recognizing it as merely a string of words.
So what's in the diffusion toolkit?
It's simple but profound. First, labeling. Instead of I can't do this, you say, I notice I am having the thought that I can't do this. That insertion of the observer self immediately creates distance.
And the objectification techniques are brilliantly effective at lowering the emotional charge.
We encourage you to externalize that internal critical monologue. Give it a name. Radio doom and gloom, constantly playing its greatest hits. When a critical thought arises, you can gently respond, thank you, mind, for that interesting contribution, and then return to the task at hand.
Or the mechanical stripping techniques, like visualizing the thought on a leaf, on a stream.
You place the thought, the image, or the feeling on a leaf, and you just watch it float past. You don't try to speed up the stream or judge the leaf. You just observe its movement.
And for truly sticky, aggressive thoughts.
Mechanical stripping, like rapid repetition of a feared word saying panic, panic, panic out loud for 30 seconds, causes it to lose its meaning and its power. These tools allow you to take valued action despite the presence of the thought.
The cognitive tools are powerful, but they are top-down. If I'm in the middle of a full-blown panic attack, the cortical shutdown makes logic impossible. Telling myself, don't catastrophize, it isn't going to work.
It's not. And that's why we need bottom-up regulation. When the biochemical flood is overwhelming, we have to reverse the therapeutic entry point. We have to use the body's input, the sensory and muscular signals, to send a safety message up to the brainstem.
And this relies on the fundamental fact that 80% of the vagus nerve fibers are afferent.
Afferent, meaning they send signals from the body to the brain. So we manually change the input. If we slow the heart, relax the diaphragm, use grounding techniques, we are creating a physiological safety signal.
That signal travels up to the brainstem, downregulates the amygdala's alarm,
And eventually stabilizes the system, allowing the prefrontal cortex to reboot. This is the whole philosophy behind ACT's dropping anchor framework.
And it's not distraction. It's tethering yourself to the reality of the present moment.
When the mind is trying to pull you into a disaster narrative, the anchor is deployed using the ACE model. A. Acknowledge. Adopt that scientist stance and label your internal experience without judgment.
Then C. Come back into your body. This is the core somatic step, establishing voluntary motor control.
You prove to your brain that you still have agency. You focus intensely on physical anchors. Push your feet into the floor, feel your spine straight against the chair, press your fingertips together.
You're shifting attention away from the racing narrative and onto the immediate, undeniable physical data.
And finally, E. Engage in what you are doing. Re-inhabit the present moment. Focus intensely on the task in front of you, the sound of the traffic, the texture of the keyboard.
Anxiety and trauma dislocate us into the past or the future.
Engagement tethers us to the here and now.
Breathing is the most accessible lever for bottom-up regulation because it's the only function of the ANS we can consciously command.
And its efficacy relies on the vagal brake mechanism. We use the phenomenon of respiratory sinus arrhythmia, the natural slowing of the heart on the exhale.
So by extending the exhalation phase,
We manually maximize the duration of vagal inhibition, actively forcing the heart rate to slow down, setting that powerful safety signal up to the brain.
let's detail the protocols. Start with the foundation, diaphragmatic breathing or belly breathing.
This is essential for reversing the shallow, rapid chest breathing associated with sympathetic activation. You should inhale slowly, focusing on filling the abdomen so your belly rises while your chest stays relatively static.
And what's the rhythm we're aiming for?
Roughly 6 breaths per minute. A 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale. That optimizes the RSA effect.
And for moments that require grounding while maintaining alertness like before a presentation, we have box breathing, tactical breathing.
This military-grade technique uses a rigid rhythmic structure. Inhale 4, hold 4, exhale 4, hold 4. The breath holds provide a small cognitive load that distracts the rumination centers, while the rhythm grounds the system.
Without making you sleepy.
Right. And for severe agitation or insomnia, the classic tranquilizer breath is the 4-7-8 breathing technique.
This one is powerful.
It maximizes the prolonged exhale ratio. Inhale quietly through the nose for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, and then exhale forcefully through the mouth, making a whoosh sound for 8 counts.
That extreme extension of the exhale forces a profound parasympathetic activation.
If you do it for 3 or 4 cycles, it acts as a genuine tranquilizer. And finally, the quick mechanical reset, cyclic sighing.
The physiological sigh.
It's a natural conserved reflex. The protocol is a deep inhale followed by a second, shorter inhale right at the very top, and that's to pop open collapsed alveoli, followed by a long, slow exhale.
And this works quickly.
Studies show that even 5 minutes of cyclic sighing significantly reduces mood distress and acute arousal. It's a very rapid intervention.
Okay, breathing calms the core system. But when we are hyper-aroused, the muscles often hold trapped fight or flight energy. We need techniques to safely discharge that physical tension.
When your muscles are tense, they send a constant danger signal to the brain. Progressive muscle relaxation, or PMR, helps interrupt this cycle.
How does it work?
You systematically tense a muscle group. Clench your fists, squeeze your shoulders up to your ears with maximum effort for 5 seconds, and then instantly release for 10 seconds. That contrast reduces overall resting muscle tone.
It teaches you the felt difference between tension and relaxation.
Exactly. But if the system is completely charged with fight energy, simply trying to relax can feel like torture. I know, I've been there. You just need to move.
That's where the safe discharge of isometric exercise comes in.
The wall push is a perfect example. You stand and push against a solid object, a wall, a desk, with about 70 to 80% of your maximum effort for 10 to 20 seconds.
So you're providing an outlet for that trapped push or fight energy.
You're burning off the adrenaline in a controlled, safe way, using proprioceptive feedback to ground yourself in reality.
And to shift the mind's focus away from rumination, the brain's default setting, we use sensory orientation.
The classic tool is the 5-4-3-2-1 technique. You list 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 you can smell, and 1 you can taste.
The power, however, is not in the listing, it's in the description.
Absolutely. If you simply list, I see phone, desk, pen, the prefrontal cortex isn't engaged. You must force the descriptive language. I see a dull gray pen with tiny teeth marks near the cap.
Articulating the detail forces the brain to shift neural activity from the emotional limbic system to the task-positive network.
It forces you into the present. And for listeners experiencing acute panic or tachycardia, there's one tool that acts as a true physiological hard reset, the mammalian dive reflex.
This is an ancient, conserved reflex.
When cold water, ideally 15 degrees Celsius or colder, stimulates the nerve around the eyes and nose while you hold your breath, it immediately triggers powerful parasympathetic dominance.
And it slows the heart rate by 10 to 25% almost instantly.
It acts as an override switch for the sympathetic flood. If you're at home, plunging your face into a bowl of ice water is the most potent version of this intervention.
Finally, a crucial note on implementation. These tools must match the person's state, using the window of tolerance concept.
Yes. If you are in hyperarousal sympathetic, racing mind, jittery, you need downregulating tools. Prolonged exhales, cold water, PMR.
But if you are in hyperarousal dorsal vagal, sluggish, dissociated, feeling numb, those relaxing tools will sink you further.
You need upregulating tools. Movement, the wall push, or high sensory input like the 5-4-3-2-1 technique to mobilize the system back into the window of tolerance.
We've covered how to regulate the body and restructure the thoughts. Now we move to the final piece. Behavior. Because the persistence of anxiety relies entirely on the cycle of avoidance.
Avoidance is the engine, and its fuel is negative reinforcement. Anxiety is triggered, the person avoids the situation, we call that the dodge, and they get an immediate powerful reduction in distress, the ah moment.
And that relief powerfully reinforces the avoidance behavior.
It teaches the brain, avoidance action X saved my life.
And the trap is set. By avoiding the situation, you never get the chance to learn that the situation was safe, or that the anxiety would have subsided on its own. Your world shrinks.
And your belief in your own fragility grows. And this avoidance is often very subtle, manifesting as safety behaviors.
These are insidious because they are performed within the feared situation. They're like a security blanket.
A person with social anxiety might switch their phone and avoid eye contact. A person with health anxiety might excessively research symptoms or check their pulse.
The danger of the safety behavior is that it prevents disconfirmation. The brain attributes survival to the crutch.
I only got through the meeting because I rehearsed every sentence, not because the meeting was inherently safe.
And neurobiologically, this is a failure of regulation because avoidance short-circuits extinction learning.
It prevents the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the VMPFC, the brain's safety executive, from sending inhibitory safety signals down to the amygdala. The fear learning is blocked.
The clinical gold standard for breaking this cycle is exposure therapy, but the way we understand why it works has undergone a massive change. For years, the philosophy was based on emotional processing theory, or EPT.
EPT used a hydraulic model. Fear is pressure in a tank, and the goal was habituation, staying in the feared situation until the pressure naturally dissipated.
And the rule was rigid. Never end an exposure session while anxiety is high.
But wait, that model failed, didn't it?
It did. Researchers found that some patients would habituate perfectly in the therapist's office. Anxiety would drop to 0, but they would immediately relapse outside. It turned out that anxiety reduction wasn't the core mechanism.
And that led to the paradigm shift toward inhibitorial learning theory, or ILT.
So what does ILT say about fear?
ILT says the original fear memory is permanent, but therapy builds a new, competing safety memory designed to inhibit the old fear trace. We don't erase fear, we learn something stronger.
And the engine of this new learning is expectancy violation.
The prediction error. The learning occurs when the patient predicted a catastrophe. If I speak up, I will pass out. And the actual outcome is benign. Nothing happens.
That prediction error is what maximizes learning.
And crucially, ILT states that fear reduction is irrelevant to the learning process. You can be terrified, but if the feared consequence doesn't happen, the brain updates its model of reality.
This shift encourages what they call desirable difficulties, strategies that actually increase initial anxiety but lead to better long-term retention of safety.
This transforms the exposure protocol. First, you stay until the expectancy is violated, regardless of your SEDS level. Second, you introduce variability. Change the context, the environment, the triggers, so the brain doesn't confine the safety memory to just one location.
And the most crucial ILT-driven strategy is the total elimination of safety behaviors.
Zero tolerance for crutches. No deep breathing, no phone checking, no ritualistic planning. Why? To ensure the patient attributes their survival and coping ability to themselves and the reality of the situation.
I survived the flight because flights are safe.
Not, I survived because I continuously reminded myself of the emergency exits. This is non-negotiable for true learning.
To structure this process, we use the exposure hierarchy, or fear ladder, ranking specific, measurable tasks using the SEDS scale. from 0 to 100.
And the tasks must be behavioral. For panic disorder, we use interoceptive exposure, deliberately inducing the physical sensations of panic-like rapid breathing or spinning in a chair to break the catastrophic interpretation of those benign sensations.
And for ritualistic anxiety, particularly OCD, we use exposure and response prevention, or ERP.
ERP is the gold standard for OCD. You confront the stimulus, the contamination, the intrusive thought, and you prevent the compulsion. The core demand is tolerating the anxiety and the uncertainty without the ritualistic response.
Which proves to the brain that the feared outcome is not contingent upon the ritual. It's a huge ask to tell someone to deliberately activate their panic system. Why should they endure this discomfort? This is where acceptance and commitment therapy provides the essential motivation.
ACT reframes exposure away from just symptom reduction and toward values-based living. The real problem isn't the anxiety. It's the experiential avoidance that has pulled a person away from their core values.
Being a present parent, pursuing a creative career, maintaining intimacy.
So the goal shifts from I must get rid of anxiety before I act to I am willing to feel anxious so I can move toward what matters to me.
That's the power of willingness versus wanting. You don't have to want the anxiety.
But you must adopt the stance of willingness to act while the anxiety is fully present. This builds psychological flexibility, the ability to persist in valued action despite the presence of internal discomfort.
The integrated ACENTEL protocol sounds like it has to start with defining the mission.
It does. You identify the value first. You frame the task as a test of the hypothesis. I am willing to feel a SUDS of 70 in this crowded room because I value connection.
And during the execution?
You state the prediction. I predict I will have a panic attack. You execute, dropping all safety behaviors, and the post-exposure processing focuses solely on the learning moment.
What actually happened? How did this compare to your prediction? What did you learn about your ability to handle the feeling?
That's the learning moment. This journey has taken us from the primitive wiring of the reptilian brain through the polyvagal map and into these sophisticated behavioral strategies. We started by depathologizing anxiety.
And we end there. The path to freedom is not about silencing the alarm with shame or force, but about befriending the nervous system.
Recognizing its protective language, fight, flight, freeze, fawn-respecting its survival responses, and then actively teaching it new, accurate safety memories through expectancy violation.
We've given you the tools to regulate the body with somatic anchors, restructure the thoughts with diffusion, and change the behavior with exposure and ILT.
The goal is not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage, which is just the willingness to act in the presence of fear. It is the ultimate reclamation of autonomy.
Which brings us to a final provocative thought for you, the learner.
If avoidance powerfully reinforces the belief that you are weak and incapable, what single small safety behavior, maybe it's checking your phone during a lull in conversation, excessively researching the safety of destination, or performing a small mental ritual, what one thing can you commit to dropping today? That small, deliberate act of dropping the crutch is how you prove to your brain's safety executive that you are, in fact, capable of handling reality, fear included.
That is the perfect challenge to take forward. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the neuroscience of anxiety. We hope this knowledge gives you a clearer map for navigating the storms ahead.
It's the strength to build anew. It's the light to guide you through. It's the choice to find your way. Starting here, starting today.
I hope today's episode gave you a massive sense of relief. We spend so much time blaming our character or our willpower for our anxiety, when often we should be looking at our chemistry. If you have been beating yourself up for not being able to just think positive your way out of a panic attack, I want you to stop. You aren't weak. You are just navigating a complex biological system that is a little more sensitive than others. And there is nothing wrong with that. Until then, be gentle with yourself. You're doing better than you think. I'll catch you on your journey.